Everyone remembers Pearl Harbor. They remember D-Day. They remember Stalingrad. But years before any of those battles, China was already fighting what many historians consider the first major front of the Second World War. For 8 brutal years, China resisted one of the world's most powerful militaries, tied down hundreds of thousands of Japanese troops, endured some of the worst atrocities of the entire conflict, and suffered millions of deaths. Some historians even argue that without China's resistance, the road to Pearl Harbor might have looked very different. So why has China's role in World War II been largely forgotten? This is the story of the forgotten ally that helped shape the war against Imperial Japan. Most people marked the beginning of World War II as September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. But in Asia, war had already begun. Relations between China and Japan had been tense ever since Japan's victory in the First Sino-Japanese War of 1894 to 1895. By the early 20th century, Japan had transformed into an industrial and military power with ambitions of building an empire across East Asia. China, meanwhile, was deeply divided. The ruling nationalist government under Chiang Kai-shek was locked in a bitter civil war with Mao Zedong's communist forces. Japan saw an opportunity. In September 1931, Japanese officers staged the Mukden incident as a pretext to invade Manchuria, a resource-rich region in northeastern China. Within months, Japan had occupied the territory and created the puppet state of Manchukuo. The League of Nations condemned the invasion. Japan simply withdrew from the League and ignored the criticism. Over the next several years, Japanese forces steadily expanded their influence across northern China, while Chiang Kai-shek focused most of his attention on defeating the communists. Only after Chiang was detained during the Xi'an incident in December 1936 by his own generals, who believed Japan posed the greater threat, he reluctantly agreed to form a temporary united front with Mao. Neither side trusted the other, but both understood that a larger war was coming. On the night of July 7, 1937, Japanese troops were conducting military exercises near the Marco Polo Bridge outside Beijing. During the exercise, one Japanese soldier briefly went missing. Japanese commanders demanded permission to enter the nearby Chinese town of Wanping to search for him. Chinese forces refused. The standoff escalated into gunfire. Historians still debate whether the incident was accidental, the result of local tensions, or deliberately exploited by Japan as a justification for war. Whatever its cause, the consequences were enormous. The Second Sino-Japanese War had begun. Japanese forces quickly captured Beijing. Their next objective was Shanghai. Although Japan possessed superior aircraft, artillery, tanks, and naval support, Chinese forces resisted fiercely. For more than 3 months, the Battle of Shanghai became one of the bloodiest urban battles of the 1930s. China ultimately lost the city, but the unexpected resistance shattered Japanese expectations of a quick campaign. The war Japan thought would end in months was only beginning. In December 1937, Japanese troops entered China's nationalist capital of Nanjing. What followed became one of the darkest episodes of the 20th century. Over the next 6 weeks, Japanese soldiers murdered large numbers of civilians and disarmed Chinese prisoners of war. Women and girls were subjected to widespread sexual violence. Entire neighborhoods were looted and burned. Most historians estimate that between 200,000 and 300,000 people were killed during what became known as the Nanjing Massacre. Foreign missionaries, diplomats, and businessmen established the Nanjing Safety Zone, sheltering tens of thousands of civilians and documenting many of the atrocities. The massacre shocked observers around the world. Yet even after losing its capital, China refused to surrender. Instead, Chiang Kai-shek relocated the nationalist government deep into China's interior, making Chongqing the new wartime capital. From there, China would continue fighting for another 7 years. By 1938, Japan appeared unstoppable. It controlled much of China's coastline and many of its largest cities. Many foreign observers believed Chinese resistance would soon collapse. Instead, the war became a grinding stalemate. Nationalist armies withdrew into the vast interior, trading territory for time. Communist forces expanded guerrilla operations behind Japanese lines across northern China. Japan held major cities and railways, but it never gained full control of the countryside. Every new offensive demanded more soldiers, more equipment, and more fuel. What was supposed to be a swift victory became a prolonged war of attrition. At various points during the conflict, roughly 1/3 of the Imperial Japanese army was committed to operations in China. Unable to force China to surrender, Japan faced an increasingly expensive war that consumed enormous amounts of manpower and resources. As Western economic pressure intensified, Japanese leaders increasingly looked south toward the oil and raw materials of Southeast Asia. As war spread across Europe, China became strategically important to the Allies. The Soviet Union supplied aircraft, tanks, and military advisors to help the Chinese nationalists resist Japan. The United States extended loans, military aid, and eventually included China in the Lend-Lease program. Then came a series of increasingly severe American embargoes on oil, aviation fuel, and strategic materials. Japan now faced a critical choice: withdraw from China or seize the resources it needed elsewhere. Japan chose expansion. Historian Rana Mitter argues that China's continued resistance fundamentally altered Japan's strategic calculations. Had China surrendered in 1938, Japan may not have faced the same urgency to expand farther into Southeast Asia. Without that expansion and the embargoes it provoked, the chain of events leading to Pearl Harbor might have unfolded very differently. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The Pacific War had become part of a truly global conflict. After Pearl Harbor, China officially became one of the 4 principal Allied powers alongside the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. President Franklin Roosevelt envisioned these nations as the policemen that would help maintain peace after the war. American aircraft began operating from Chinese airfields. Military advisors arrived to assist Chinese forces. Supplies reached China over the dangerous Burma Road and later through the air route known as the Hump across the Himalayas. Even with Allied support, China continued carrying the burden of the land war against Japan. Between 500,000 and 600,000 Japanese troops remained tied down in China for much of the conflict. Large numbers of experienced Japanese divisions stayed committed there, limiting the forces available for campaigns elsewhere in the Pacific. Japan launched its largest campaign in China, the Ichigo Offensive, in 1944, capturing territory and destroying several American air bases. Yet China continued resisting. In August 1945, the Soviet Union invaded Japanese-held Manchuria. Days earlier, the United States had dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Facing defeat on multiple fronts, Japan surrendered on September 2, 1945. China's war was finally over. Victory came at an extraordinary cost. Entire cities had been devastated. Railways, factories, and farmland lay in ruins. Historians estimate that around 100 million Chinese became refugees within their own country. Deaths are commonly estimated between 12 and 20 million people. Many died in combat. Millions more perished from famine, disease, forced labor, massacres, and displacement. In one of the war's most controversial decisions, nationalist forces deliberately breached the Yellow River dikes in 1938 to slow the Japanese advance. The flooding disrupted Japanese operations, but also caused catastrophic destruction and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians. Even victory brought no lasting peace. Almost immediately, the fragile alliance between the nationalists and communists collapsed. China's civil war resumed. By 1949, Mao Zedong's communist forces defeated Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government, fundamentally reshaping modern China. As former wartime allies became Cold War rivals, memories of China's role in the Allied victory gradually faded in both East and West. Today, World War II is often remembered through Normandy, Midway, Stalingrad, and the Battle of Britain. Yet years before many of those famous battles were fought, China was already locked in a desperate struggle against Imperial Japan. For 8 years, its soldiers and civilians endured one of history's most devastating wars. Its resistance forced Japan to commit enormous military resources to China, influenced Japan's strategic decisions, and became an important part of the broader Allied effort in the Pacific. China did not win the war alone, but its contribution helped shape the conflict that ultimately defeated Imperial Japan. Despite that immense sacrifice, China's wartime story remains one of the most overlooked chapters of the Second World War. And understanding World War II is impossible without understanding the war China fought long before much of the world joined the battle.